Hey guys, welcome to the Elite Coaching Podcast, episode 12. Joined with Dermot. We're going to run through some digestion tips, some causations of poor digestion, and hopefully give everyone a bit of an insight into how to improve their digestive health. D, how are you, man?
I'm great. Yeah, doing good. How about yourself?
Good. It's been a while since we've done one of these. We're a little bit rusty, I think, but well, just kind of run through a little bit of a recap, really. D, what's been going on with you, man? What have you been up to since we jumped on one of these last?
Since we've even chatted, I run now.
Oh yeah, part-time bodybuilder, part-time runner.
Well, I wouldn't call it run, but it's more so I just like lean my center of mass forward and fall for like 5 days.
And this is just something you picked up recently?
So my mom wanted to train for a marathon, and she won't train without me, so we're doing it together.
So you're going to do a marathon?
I'm going to do a marathon, man.
Are you actually going to do one?
Yeah.
That's cool, man. Do you know what? I think if anything, the last year has taught us it's to broaden your horizons a little bit more. Like the fact that we don't have the gym at our availability, it's like, right, let's just start fucking doing something else. And I think for myself, even from like a programming perspective, I'm even starting to program a lot of things now that I probably wouldn't have programmed before, just because we don't have that availability. A lot more aerobic work coming in, so that's pretty exciting. How's everything else been, man? How's everything in life been at the moment?
Right. Yeah. I'm in a nice little routine at the moment. I lost my way for a couple of weeks. Just I suppose, as you do, head was not in a fantastic spot, let's say, but I'm doing splendidly now. How about yourself?
Good, man. Good. Back on prep at the moment. So I'm going to do a photo shoot in August, 16th of August. We're booked in for. So, you know what, dude? I just got into a good groove, man. I'm like, right, you know what? Training is going fantastic at the moment. Back feeling strong. Back feeling like I was never big, but like somewhat big, up to like 94 kilo. Like actually relatively lean at 94 kilos as well, which is surprising for me because I went through a little bit of a chunky phase during the lockdown. So ran a little recomp and said, you know what? The fire, you know yourself, when the fire is there, it's there, and you just have to go with it, man, don't you? Like when the fire is lit, you're like, right, you know what? I just have to get myself into this. So, booked a shoot 16th of August. Got myself a new coach, and everything is just going good, man. Like business is going well. And I think of how we have things set up now, just the way we run our check-ins and the efficiency of everything. It's a perfect time to prep. And like I had a couple of holidays lined up that obviously can't go ahead now because of COVID. It's supposed to be actually in Dubai now at the moment as we speak. Yeah, man. So it's supposed to be in Dubai now at the moment. I don't want to talk too much about it because it was emotional and sensitive topic, but we're supposed to be away at the moment. So with that being cancelled, and I'm like, you know what? No better way. And you know what I think as well, dude, we have like a nice little run now of our own prep clients that are going to be starting on the 5th of March. I think it'd be nice for me to get involved with them. So that's the kind of that's been me. So yeah, training's going good. Training in a facility now at the moment that's really, really good, and like kind of like a closed off little environment. But I feel it's a perfect thing for a prep. You know, I feel, you know, it's like going to this. Sometimes you'd rather be a little bit kind of inclusive and a little bit kind of pulled away from the bigger kind of mainstream gym settings and environments, and a lot better than training from home. So that's kind of been me. Business is good, and training is very good at the moment. So I'm a happy camper. How has clients and stuff been with you, man? How's everything rolling on that front?
Yeah, I'm so happy with how people are getting on. It's nice, I suppose. Like we're all in a routine now where this is how it is. And sometimes I'm doing check-ins and I'm like watching back through training footage and being like, you probably don't need to return to a gym.
Nah, don't say that. Everyone will be like, if the gyms open up and D starts continuing home workouts for me, they're gonna crack.
No, but like what I mean is training can be so efficient from home if we set it up well.
Yeah.
And like we've seen over the last year now, like people have like continued to progress. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter your experience, I suppose. It's just your ability to work with what you got. And like even with extremely limited kit, we can still progress, which is very, very cool. That's very, very cool.
That's what I found in the last, especially this prep rotation that we've had from January to now. The results that we've gotten with people, and like most of them haven't had like much. Like you're talking a couple of dumbbells and a band, but still managing to get like very, very good levels of condition, really good holding and maintaining fantastic levels of muscle mass and even building tissue throughout. We're like, do you know what? You're right. Like a lot of, I think obviously people will return back to the gyms, but I think people are starting to just become so accepting of it now that they're like, whether we have the gyms or whether we don't, like we're still just gonna crack on the way we need to crack on and make the progress that we need to make, you know.
Yeah, I agree, and it's cool to see as well. Yeah, it's really, really cool to see. I know we've had this conversation many a time where if we had chatted about this 18 months ago, what do you mean you're not willing to train from a gym? No,
But I think so many people have invested so much. Like when we do like consults, like I had like 3 people on board this weekend that they may as well have a fully kitted out gym in their house. Like you're talking plates and barbells, dumbbells past 200 kilo. Like you're talking incline benches, like all these different setups now, the home pulley systems. Like people have invested so much in their home training because it clearly means that much to them. That and anyone listening on, like, you know, I know a lot of people were nearly banking on it being April, May. If you have the means, I would highly recommend investing in, even if you could get like 100 kilo worth of weight, whether it's plates, dumbbells, just something to have at home, to means that you can continually progress. Because I think so many people sat on the back foot. I'm like, I don't want to make that investment. Be the best money you ever spent, 100%.
Especially like if you bought them, I said the adjustable dumbbells up to 40 kilos, 400 quid or something like that, maybe 500 quid. That's your year's membership that you would have saved.
But that over the last year, you would have been able to progress. What can't you do with an adjustable dumbbell? Absolutely everything. You know, you're literally like unlimited. But that's definitely another day's topic.
Massive they are though.
Sorry.
The dumbbells are massive.
Yeah, I know. Even it's so funny watching feedback, client feedback, and they're doing like a side raise, but it's on like a 5 kilo dumbbell, but the dumbbell is so big. It's adjustable dumbbell, but it's obviously so light for them. Or watching girls do biceps or hammer curls, and the dumbbell is just so big. It's hilarious. But look, I'm so admirable of people, and you know what I think over the last couple of weeks, when we've been like lamping out the transformations, I think it's brought a lot of inspiration to people as well, that so many people have been like sitting on the back foot about training from home and the availability of being able to get really good results from home, that they're just like, you know what, I'm just going to go for it now. I'm just going to take the bull by the horns and I'm not going to make excuses anymore. I'm just going to do it. But it's definitely been a year that, like we said, has just opened up people's mindsets and opened up people's thought processes on training an awful lot more, I think.
Yeah, I really agree.
Right, dude. So I'm going to go through digestion today. That is one of the topics that I think we've definitely been like meaning to cover, because we've kind of covered a lot on the podcast. Now we're 12 episodes in, but we've covered a lot of really good topics. And this is definitely one that I think for a lot of people, there's just misinformation out there. You know, whenever we read up on digestion, and again, one of the big things that we're going to really try to cover within today is the mindset when we think about digestion, that prevention is always better than cure. You know, I think whenever people think about, oh, I'm bloated, I've got constipation, diarrhea, I've got this, the immediate thought process and action behind it, it's always, how do I cure this? Not, how do I prevent this from ever happening again? And what we're going to kind of overview in a sense nearly at the start today is that majority of the causations are going to come from things that we can prevent happening. And I think from a digestive standpoint, a lot of those common, there's obviously uncommon things that may not fall into that category, but most of the common digestive problems that people face can be met with more of a prevention standpoint, I feel. So what we'll kind of run through first, which is probably the biggest one, stress. I think we both agree on that one.
Yeah. So I have yet to meet a client who hasn't benefited from us getting really, really good at being a chill ass. What can we call it? A chill ass human. Let's say, and it's one of them things where, especially for digestive issues, a lot of it is massively influenced by stress. So, for example, it is like you might have this slight underlying something. So let's call it a slight underlying intolerance to something, or maybe it might be an excessive amount of fructose that sets your digestion off. But that is going to be multiplied by stress.
Yeah.
So if we can get really really good at eating in a stress free environment, or getting really really good at being chilled out, full stop. Vast majority of cases, along with, I suppose, everything else that we do, nutrition wise as well, is going to be so helpful that it's hard to say that it's the stress a lot, like the us getting better at managing stress alone, but everything as a whole can be really really beneficial, I suppose.
Yeah, I think the tone of stress needs to be addressed with people, and from a lot of people, I think it's eating in that stress state, and but I think from a lot of people they don't really understand the implications that it may have. So to not like go into too much of a deep conversation about this, but just to kind of keep it relatable to people, when we talk about stress, we're talking about that kind of sympathetic and parasympathetic tone. So we're looking at that constant relationship that we're trying to have. And like you said, it's what we try to do. We try to teach people when you're stressed, and when you're allowed to be stressed, try to keep your food away from that window as close as possible. So if you look at like this whole kind of old methodology that the second you walk out of a gym, you need to start swamping food. Like we will kind of have that allowance that when you're in the gym and you're training, or you're training from home, or when you're, coming out of a very, very stressful meeting in work, or you've just got off the phone from the mortgage advisor, you just got off the phone from the accountant, probably not the most optimal time to eat your food. Just in the simple reason, there's a massive diversion of blood flow away from the gastrointestinal system. There's a huge secretion of enzyme production in the gastrointestinal system. And if you think about it, like if we were, myself and Dee at the moment, getting chased by lions back in the animal kingdom, we're not going to start sitting down and start eating food. And the body doesn't understand that differential. The body does not understand the changeover in when we were biologically ingrained, being chased by those lions out in the field versus picking 100 kilo up off the floor. Stress is still stress. And what we need to kind of understand is that poor response from a digestible standpoint. So is there anything that you would like program for people from a stress point of view around food?
Yeah, quite a bit. So one thing that I'm sure pretty much everybody's come across, especially if you've tried to get like pretty good at doing some meditation, is yeah, it is beneficial. It's definitely beneficial, but it's only as beneficial as you as much as you do it. But one of the things that is more realistic for everybody to do forever is just 90 seconds before eating a meal. Just chill out, do some guided breathing. Then, even like post workout, we might be able to pull that, especially if you're pushing food and you do have the time meals and stuff. We can probably get into a parasympathetic state a lot faster if we can do like 2 minutes of guided breathing after we train, because we know we need to get a meal in, kind of thing. Yeah, and then like just kind of our normal stress management stuff as well. Like phone off in the evening, all that good stuff that every single one of us should be doing. And we all know how much better we feel for it as well. So it doesn't matter of being like, okay, right, it's part of who I am. It's part of what I do. Phone's off.
Do you think as well the the subtraction of certain aspects around the feeding window, like subtraction of social media, subtraction of like environments, they're obviously going to play a massive role as well, isn't it, right?
Yeah, massively. Now, sometimes what I find personally is like I don't have any digestive issues, so I will probably watch something as I eat. Um, who knows? There's the opportunity that comes back and bites me in the arse in 10 years' time. I'm not saying that, but I don't know. I feel like you might be the same there as well. It's just like if I'm not working, I'm eating, and I want to catch up on something.
Yeah, I think for again, from our aspect, it's always at that phase of prevention. So even though we may like pop up the iPad or pop up the phone when we're watching something on YouTube or catching up on something on social media, but we have also trained ourselves, like training the gut to be in a very relaxed position while we eat the food. But I think when we're speaking of that, what a lot of people don't do is they will jump on social media and they'll jump on, they'll have like a can of Monster with a meal or have a coffee with a meal, and that like immediate offset of caffeine is going to hugely spike sympathetic dominance. And for them, it's like they haven't put their body into a responsive state to be able to digest the food in the first place. So yeah, no, I've definitely fallen victim to it as well in the past, where like I've either eaten the meal too fast or I've eaten the meal in that environment. And I think for a lot of coaches, obviously now not at the moment, but when coaches think about their digestion, it's like when you're eating a meal on the gym floor, or you have a client at 5 o'clock and you have another client at 6, and you finish the first client at 5 to 5, and you run inside and try to throw down 400 calories of chicken and rice in between a client, you have to understand like your digestive system has to be treated with respect. To get a respectful response out of it, it needs to be treated with respect, 110%. And I think just having that consistent awareness of it. And look, what as well, I think people always get so wrapped up in this mindset of having to eat as well. You don't have to eat consistently throughout the day. You can have large meals start the day. You can have, if you have 4 or 5 hours during the day where stress levels are like up to the nines. If you've got 4 clients back to back, or us as online coaches now, if you have, a check-in window where you're going to bash through 15 to 20 check-ins, and between that period, you need to have cognitive function at 100%. Don't ever be afraid to push meals out to avoid those highly stressful kind of time periods. But I think definitely just controlling that sympathetic tone a lot more, having that availability of more blood flow to the gut, having that availability of more enzyme production in the gut. And as well, when you're in that parasympathetic state, like you're gonna be more responsive and respectful, like I said. And when you're in that sympathetic tone, it's just not the most respectful time to be trying to like we said, think back to that analogy of being chased by a lion. You're not going to be in a very responsive state. You got a big ass lion chasing you, and it's the same thing just after training. It's the same thing coming out of a meeting, and you just have to be more responsive to that, I think.
Yes. So like just from experience with clients and experience with myself as well, it's just like, okay, I need to set up my day in such a way that with the bigger volume meals where I'm going to have maybe I'm going to have minced sweet potato and big ass portion of veg, it's going to take me 20 minutes to eat. And it should as well.
Rather than you giving yourself 5.
Oh yeah, and it can be done. Like but it's not something to be worn with a badge of honor as well. Like that's one of the things where when I was growing up, that was always a problem. It was just like you eat too slow, and now I turn around, I'm like, no.
Oh, that's a good point to make, because that is something that actually I've been thinking a lot about. Is like, do we inherently take in things from our parents that, like, when they were growing up, you were told to eat fast, and when they were growing up, it's like something that was like biologically ingrained in them that then they kind of pass on to us. But it's only now, since that we have started to kind of open up these avenues and these pathways of understanding digestion a little bit more, that, like, yourself, whenever we program that 5, 10, 15, 20 rule for clients, I'm like, look, you have to give yourself, at the end, 20 minutes to eat that meal. How many clients find it very difficult to start to adapt to that? I'd say 60, 70%. Like, a lot of people find it, when you tell them, like, put your phone in front of you, 20-minute timer. You want from first mouthful to last mouthful to go that entire 20 minutes. People could do it in 5, and they just find it very hard. But that's a good point to make, that, potentially has this been ingrained in us since we're very, very young, that you have to eat fast, and eating on the go as well has been ingrained in us since, like, because I even know, like, Harper, she's going into the senior infants. She'll be 5. She's 5 on next month. And they do a lot of things that's correct inside their school. Like, they go for daily miles every day, where they do like 2 laps at the park. They do 1 walk lap, 1 run lap to get like their steps in. I think it's fantastic. But when they come in from their steps, their teacher puts like a timer on for their lunch. So I'm like, first of all, probably in a bit of a sympathetic state there, Harper. You shouldn't really be eating your food. But secondly, it's like, it's teaching them already you have to eat fast. And I'm like, oh, it's probably something you shouldn't do to a kid. Like,
Yeah, like that's such a funny one. It's just like, okay, eat as fast as you can and make sure you finish your plate. And it's just like, they're probably like, especially if you're going to be somebody who's coaching Gen Pop, or you are Gen Pop yourself and you're not going to be tracking your food. It's just like, they're probably the two most backwards cues that we want. It's like, I want you to leave food on your plate and I want you to eat slowly.
yeah, as slowly as
if
possible.
if the goal is to learn how to eat two hunger cues, which, like, as normal people, as 98% of your clients and stuff are going to be, it's like pretty big important things that are very hard to get out of the habit of doing. So like, and that's a really cool thing to do as well, as trialing the eating two hunger cues. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is by actually being mindful.
Yeah.
Which is difficult. which is definitely difficult.
It's so hard for people to grasp that concept of being mindful around food and timing your meals, counting how many times you chew from within those meals. But yeah, I think, like, we can both agree, stress is probably, like you said at the start, it's probably number one causation, but it's also one of them things that when you start to manage your stress a lot more, manage not only around the meal, but overall, seeking improvements in your energy levels, seeking improvements in your sleep, seeking improvements if you track your HRV, stuff like that, resting heart rate function. But those will automatically almost correlate immediately towards a better digestive system, just by that parasympathetic tone being more present. What do we say? Parasympathetic, you're talking of your rest and digest. You're looking at sympathetic, you're not looking at rest and digest. You're looking at fight or flight, kind of hit and run response. You don't want to be in that side of the autonomic nervous system when you're trying to digest. When you're trying to digest food. So we kind of covered a good bit on that stressor. And the next one, and probably something that people don't really correlate towards when they think about their digestion, is fluid availability. So this is something that I've been looking into an awful lot more of lately, is my clients' fluid intake. Because the one thing that we've started to research a lot more into, I've just read a phenomenal book called The Athlete's Gut, and they talk a lot about fluid availability in here. And the number one thing that they're trying to always look for is fluid secretion. So they have, a rough kind of guideline: male or female, moderately active, maybe training 2 to 3 times a week, has a decent step count, could excrete up to 3 liters of fluid per day through urination, stool, and sweat. But if you think about, that's the secretion rate of 3 liters. Like, how many people wouldn't even touch 1.5 liters of fluid, and they would be moderately active? A lot of people, when people come into us and we're starting to track their fluid intake, I can't tell you the amount of, like, probably with over 80% of clients within the first week, we tell them immediately increase your fluid intake. When you look at their fluid, 1 liter to 1.5 liters of water, and when we track total fluid, you may get to 2 liters, but that 2 liters will probably come from some form of carbonated and sodium dense or caffeinated drink, which probably wouldn't fall into the same category as just pure fluid, because obviously the role that's going to play from a hydration standpoint, probably going to go more in the opposite, causing more of a diuresis effect. But the one thing that I think is important to kind of note on this one, when we're looking at fluid, is fluid intake at a higher range can speed up digestive process. Because when we start to shut down the fluid intake, again, we think about secretion of fluid comes from urination, sweat, and stool. It's how we get fluid out of the body. And when we start to look a little bit more into how fluid is secreted, if we're pulling back from fluid, it's then going to start to pull back from that secretion rate. So if we're pulling back from fluid intake, it's going to pull back on the amount of urination. If we pull back from fluid intake, it's going to start to pull back from the amount of stool that we have. And probably this may, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later on when we talk about constipation, but definitely something to note at the start as a big causation. Anything you want to throw into that?
No, I think you explained that well. Yeah.
I think that's probably a bit of an eye opener for people, because it's probably something that they don't really think about, is fluid. But definitely as coaches listening in, like start taking note of it. But like I said, an average male or female can secrete up to 3 liters a day. It's crazy to think about that when we really break it down, and when we look at that kind of seesaw effect, intake in versus out. We want to be kind of metabolizing it.
Especially when we look at it, like when you look at dehydration and its effect on performance, it does tend to have some slight effects, massively depending on the amount of dehydration that you're in.
Yeah.
Like up to, like, let's say you're 2% dehydrated. Now I can't actually put a direct number on that now, but like will looks to impede performance, but it's also something that you won't notice. So usually when we're tracking hydration status, there's 3 things that we look for. Again, this is like just more of from a performance nutritionist point of view, for like aerobic athletes or weight making athletes, where we would look at things like, so there's the Likert test, and then we would do things like track like urine color via a scale of, like, I can't remember how many numbers it is, like 1 to 9. So we track that. We'd also track perception of thirst being like low, medium, high, or something like that. And then we'd also track drop in scale weight overnight. And I'm sure you've noticed that yourself, especially when you're pushing up body weight. When you're pushing up body weight, and I'm sure you've noticed that you can drop 2.5 kilo overnight.
Yeah, big time. Unwanted weight to come off as well when you're trying to push.
you just sweat it off though.
Big time. And you know what? Even like the opposite end of that spectrum, when we're looking at pulling fluid, how fast it can kind of come down in a sense as well. When obviously with peaking for photo shoots, shows, there's going to be huge effects on water intake and secretion of water. And the one thing that is hugely kind of correlated, which we're going to talk about now, is also energy availability. And when we're in a deficit and our energy availability is low and our fluid availability is low, we have to understand that those are 2 key components that your gut are going to just want and need, and it's a necessity that we keep that fluid availability high. And for a lot of our clients that may have experienced some kind of bloating, maybe some constipation in a prep, which is, by the way, I know it probably sounds pretty bad, but it's very, very common to happen when you're on a diet long term. If you let your water slip up for a couple of days, like, it is something that can happen. It's pretty damn common, but usually kind of quite an immediate fix. It kind of sounds pretty straightforward, but bringing fluid intake up. But one thing that I'll say as well, for anyone who is listening to this that may be suffering with some digestive issues, and when you're hearing us talk about fluid availability and you're saying to yourself, you know what, I actually do like drink pretty low fluid, I have a rule that when I'm bringing fluid up, I'll also try to bring up fiber intake as well. So I'll always try to just taper the 2 of them up. Seems to be a very, very good response rate when we do bring up the fluid and bringing up their fiber as well, just to kind of throw a little side note into that one.
Yeah, I think we'd call that we put some electrolytes and caffeine in there as well, and we would call it the poo stack.
Yeah. yeah. Big time. I like that.
Bit of magnesium citrate in there as well.
Yeah.
It'll be something wrong if you have digestive issues, or if you have constipation after that.
Right, D-Man, do you want to talk a little bit about energy balance and the role that that's going to play with digestion?
Yeah. So I suppose I'm just going to call it like surplus versus deficit, and the effect that is going to have. So when we're pushing food up, and actually when we're dropping food down excessively as well, so we'll see with like females with low energy availability, there will be some gut issues that we run into. But like the majority of the problems tend to come from people when we're pushing things up. So as we're pushing things up, and I know we've touched on it already, but like pushing food up high is a massive stressor. So it can potentially drive some issues in digestion from that point of view. But also just the sheer volume of food and making sure that we have things set up in a productive way. So like a couple of things that we can do there, for example, is let's say we look at meal timing. This is somewhat important to a certain extent when looking to drive hypertrophy. But more so from the point of view of getting meals in without any digestive issues. So probably going to be a good plan from it's probably going to be a good plan to not be eating over a 16-hour window. So that's something that we would see with like PTs, especially, is just like, I'm gonna have my first client at 6 o'clock, so I'm gonna have to get a meal in at 5, and then I'm gonna have my last client at 9 o'clock. I'm gonna get a meal in at 10 when I get home, and I'm gonna slam it in, and it's gonna be like a chock full of calories as well because I missed my like coaching is not a very like great job to have if you're looking after your health.
But we both built online.
um yes, so like not eating or completely around, like trying to keep things to like a 12-hour eating window is going to be a good plan. Having your meals set up in such a way where, okay, like all meals are not built equal. If I'm trying to get 5 meals in, I need to set this up around my training window where I would like to have like some meals are probably going to only need 3 hours, some are going to need 4. If I need to, now we're starting to nitpick here. But what we can do is maybe, for example, if we run like 2 really light meals at the start of the day, so maybe we go like Rice Krispies and whey pre-workout, and then post-workout again we go low fiber, low fat, high carb, high protein. We can probably have them meals like relatively close together. Maybe we'll have one like an hour before we train and an hour post. That in itself will be fine, I believe. So that's personally what I will do. Like if I'm setting somebody up with and they have a big massive meal where it's full of food volume, I will try to leave like 4 hours, nearly even 4.5, depending on the individual now, depending how many meals I have to get in. Like leaving 4 hours after that. But if it's a light meal, it's a Rice Krispies or it's a Cocoa Pops and whey, I can probably put another meal in 2.5, 3 hours after.
Yeah.
So and we don't want to be constantly putting food down on top of undigested food and it can very easily happen, especially when you're pushing things hard and fast. And then as for being in a deficit, so I haven't actually, maybe you'll be able to have a better opinion on this now, but it looks of things, unless you're in a like a chronically low energy availability state where your gut is not used to handling food, that usually causes digestive issues. Normally, like I will, if somebody's running into a roadblock with digestion, that's the first thing I will do, will pull into a deficit. So it's more so along the lines of, yeah, we might, but we've already touched on it already. We might run into constipation on that side of things.
Yeah, we're gonna go to that next.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something we might run into in the deficit, but yeah, it's more so a problem in the surplus or for clients that are really stressed, which we've touched on already.
Yeah, and I think, I think when we look at energy balance, it is nearly like a combination of everything that we've just spoken about. It's a combination of that, just sheer low, like when you speak about energy balance being higher, clearly like with the food aspect, but then when we talk a little bit more about energy being lower, it's just low food availability, just like low fluid availability. When there's low energy coming in, the mechanisms that food is going to drive are not going to be functioning. And I think one of the biggest causations that I have saw personally with people in a deficit is actually protein intake being probably too high. And whilst you're in a deficit, when you're in a deficit, naturally digestive function is going to start to slow down a little bit more. Now, this is why we will preach feeding habits a lot more. We will preach consistency in food a lot more, because just that adaptation and response is going to kick in when the body is used to something. When the body has become accustomed to something, it usually deals with it an awful lot better. And when we start to then bring in things in a deficit that may disrupt, I think, number one thing I'll always do when we start to enter into a deficit with people is I will start to lower down the protein levels as body mass starts to come down. I'll always track by lean body mass, which it's very hard to do at the start if somebody comes in, if a little bit high body weight. We're like, okay, we're trying to look through the mist a little bit and kind of guess a roundabout number. But as they get leaner, like, you'll be able to understand that a lot more. And I'll always pull that number down, and just for the simple fact that I'm always trying to keep protein levels in a very, very good range. And sometimes if it's just up that high, look, we understand that when protein comes in, it's probably one of the hardest, I'm not going to say the hardest, but one of the harder macronutrients to break down. The body understands. And this is when, we have to kind of think on that little bit of a deeper level. When there is very, very low of energy availability and protein comes in, the body recognizes and realizes effective immediately. It's not going to offer any energy. So the transitional effect it goes through of actually breaking that food down sometimes can cause a little bit of a misfire. And that's one thing that I've noticed when we look at energy availability, when we do start to pull that protein level back a little bit and start to trim down the protein level, a lot of times digestive function can actually improve. And constipation, like you said, was one of the main things that I've saw with clients and prep clients when they are in a deficit, in quite an aggressive deficit. That was always a very, very consistent trigger point. And, it's kind of come from trial and error of understanding that, okay, what do we need to do to improve? For a lot of people, they'll say ramp up fiber intake. Well, that's at times probably not the best thing in the world to do. And again, prevention better than cure here. Fiber is not always the cause. And for a lot of people, they think, if I have stomach issues, just ramp up my veg. But when you actually look at, like, what does fiber do to the gastrointestinal system, probably not like the best, probably not the best thing in the world. So just to kind of recap on that energy balance, because I know we're about kind of, that sounds very strange to say this, but we're about dying to jump into constipation and dying to talk a little bit more about that one. But low energy availability, obviously transitioning immediately over into low bodily function, it's natural. Protein intake being too high can be one of the major causations, and then the kind of effect of that will be then constipation. I know when I said the fiber intake, did you want to throw anything into that one as well?
Yeah. So fiber will draw war into the gut. So it actually, like, let's say, for example, the goal, we look at somebody's food and we're like, okay, right, the goal is to up your fiber, but the goal is not to up your fiber next week. Your goal is to up your fiber over the next 3 weeks. If we throw 20 grams of fiber in on top of where you're already at, yes, we will bring you up to where you should be technically, but you will not function properly. No, I can't say for sure whether that will always be the case, but it's one of them things where we should be tapering up because we won't feel too fabulous putting it all in at once. And it is one of the big things that we'll no, I know it's not really related to us, but when you're looking at, like, athletes making weight and stuff, it's like one of a pretty effective way of reducing gut volume is by reducing body weight by pulling fiber down as well.
Yeah, big time. And I think for a lot of people, it is that go-to cause, but high fiber doesn't always mean high gut movement. At times, if you're in, like, a very low energy available state, and, like you said, you just hugely spike, you're probably not going to get it. If anything, it may make the problem worse before it makes it better. Like you said, very slow and steadily increments of fiber, I think, is a written rule. But again, more kind of that would be more along the lines of looking at it an immediate fix to a problem that needs to be resolved over a very long period. And when you look at constipation, people will always look for the quick fixes, laxatives, trying, for whatever reason this came about. I don't know who created it, but driving fiber intake up, that's like fixing a problem there. And even though, like, fiber is not going to fix that problem, that's fixing a problem there and then. But we have to think, what's the causation of that? So when we look at constipation, because that's what we do want to kind of fire over into next, we'll talk about constipation, bloating, diarrhea, loose stool. You just take the run on this one for a moment. Do you just kind of run through, like, what constipation is and the kind of ins and outs of it?
Yeah, so like there's a couple of things that will drive it in the most scenarios. That being dehydration, low sodium potassium intake, low fiber as well there, or yeah, that that tends to be it. Um, I'm sure. I'm sure there is definitely more. I'm sure there is more reasons why, but that seems to be the most common that I will run into anyway, where fixing stuff like that will help. Um, as for like the on the opposite side of this the spectrum, things that will drive loose stool, unless it's pretty much everything that we touched on at the very start, being like stress, unless we so stress will be a pretty big one. Running will be a pretty big one. So running wreaks havoc on digestion.
Yeah.
um it's one of them things where um like especially like people who actually run properly, not like me falling forward around Malahide Park. They will run into things like bloody stool and stuff, and they will actually just lose their bowel as they're training. I'm sure we've seen photos of that poor bloke losing his arse down his legs as he was doing a marathon. And
That's actually something that they touch on a lot in the book, is that the athlete's approach to just that bowel emptying. And there's a lot of things, again, it's so multifactional, but multifactorial, should I say, but very interesting to say the least, of why it happens.
yes, so especially with runners, we'll see things like non-steroidal anti-inflammatories will affect it, fructose will affect it, fiber will affect it, and fat will affect it. I don't know if protein will directly, but I can see it affecting it indirectly.
I
It's
think the absorption rate of protein may affect it. Like what you're coming in, so we're thinking of more longer endurance.
yeah,
And I know obviously when we factor in protein pre-workouts, we're dealing with something completely different. So when we say this, nobody, like no pun intended, nobody shit the bed and say I shouldn't be having like protein pre-training. We're talking more here about longer duration, like
oh yeah,
endurance athletes. Yeah, I personally can't see a benefit of having a protein intake around that window. Maybe post, but pre, certainly I can't see it.
just in endurance athletes,
Yeah.
yeah. It's very um it's very depending on the athlete. Some people are absolutely fine. Like some people, especially if you've run for your entire life and you're not at an extreme. So when, like, let's say for example, in his name's Patrick, isn't it? He's that wrote that book.
Patrick Wilson.
Yeah. So like when we look at like the big gut issues, that tends to be in like more advanced level athletes. But if we're looking at like just normal people going for a run, it doesn't tend to ever be the problem. I can't say ever, so retract that statement. But it looks to be less likely of a problem in normal people.
Yeah. I think a good one to kind of, we're not going to dive into but even speak about it, is like when you're talking about more of endurance-based athletes as well, their protein requirements are always way, like it seems to be way less than if you're looking at a trained individual. Like I know we will always kind of, it's always just wild numbers, but we'll always go from kind of like that 0.8 up to 0.1 up to 0.1.2 gram per pound. They go way less. They could be like 0.3 to 0.5 gram per pound. Seems to be like a going run on high endurance athletes.
Yeah, so I'm looking at things in per kilo. So it would be, I think the ideal amount is 1.6 grams per kilo for endurance athletes. Which
Per pound.
yeah.
I think in the book they had a point. I think it was 0.8 per kilo, which would have resulted in around 0.4 per pound. I think would be. Is that right?
0.8 per kilo
Yeah,
is
that's what Patrick Wilson references as.
yeah, and that's interesting. And not
Now he seems to be very anti-protein in the book. So maybe that's his rationale. He's probably thinking a lot of those gut issues might be relating towards protein. So maybe he's just spiraling it down low, but that's just the numbers that he was referencing in the book.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, like he must be training adaptation as well, because if we're going to be, we want to be driving adaptation, we do need like that baseline of 1.6 grams per kilo there. But it does make sense to me for us to, like, especially if you're training.
It says 0.8. I might be able to find it, but he says he's 0.8 is his number. Just give me 2 seconds. So see on the constipation, when you, and obviously we talk a lot about the like prevention aspects, and we're going to talk, we spoke about like keeping fluid intake quite high, keeping energy availability quite high. When you kind of run into it with clients in the past, what would be a kind of a point of action for you to go to when you do kind of hit that with people?
So it would more so be like, or just be going back over, let's say, for example, I've been working for somebody with 6 weeks, and we've just ran into it this week. Okay. So there was just this week, something was different. And let's go back and look at the rest of the weeks and be like, okay, right. What exactly is different here? What exactly has changed? And again, like, some of these things are like untrackable, like it might just happen, and we could try find, and we could try say it was this, but it might make us sound great as coaches, and it might just be a guess at what's happening. So if I run into things like, if I run into things on and it's just 1 week, unless I can see like directly what it might be, like could it be a lack of sleep induced increased stress, leaving that maybe. So unless I can directly find anything, I probably won't say anything on week 1. I'll be just like, okay, right, I have this taken down. Let's keep an eyeball on this next week. Okay, go back and read over your eating habits and stuff that we should be doing. That should fix things. But let's get 14 days strung back to back before I'm like, okay, let's do something about this. I don't know. Are you the same there?
Yeah, I really don't like to put in actions against it. On prep, we'll have certain things that, well, there's a Dr. Schwartz. Is that how you pronounce it? Dr. Schwartz? They create the valerian tea. They actually have a very, very good lax tea. That's like really low in like laxative amount, but has like some really cool vitamins in there. That seems to get bowel movements moving quite quickly. But again, I would only really recommend that for a prep client. We do have a lot of things that I will focus on, and kind of overviewing what we've already spoken about: a slight increase of fluid intake, a really big emphasis on stress management levels. I like to bring in, a very small amount of, fruit now from within certain meals. So potentially pulling in some pineapple, potentially pulling in some kiwi. It more tends to just kind of improve overall digestive function. Not saying that like pulling in a pineapple is going to cure constipation straight away, but the enzymes that are found in them just help digestive health more or less. And well, I think when you more again take the action of stress into it, and really like looking at pulling down potentially training volume, pulling down if they're on like high cardio. Again, we're just talking more about prep aspect here. And if they're in high cardio state, I'll look at just kind of pulling things down. So we know with constipation, it's just that slow down transit entering into the colon, and like, you just have to ask the question why. And I think that's something that probably we do very well, is we always take the step back and ask the question of why. We don't just, like you said, if it happens on week 1, you don't just jump in there and you're like, right, here's a fix to the problem. You'll take a step back and you'll say, okay, well, why did this happen? And let's see if it happens again. Let's not just jump at a conclusion to say this is a reason as to why that happened. But for us, just looking at stress from that standpoint, to be completely honest, very small and minute things just to kind of improve bowel movement and frequency. But a lot of the times, like you said, it is just taking that step back and saying, okay, if it happened today, may not happen tomorrow. When we do put in those little actions, they can definitely help get things moving. But I think, like you said, just trying to ask the question of why, and just always working on that prevention is better than cure aspect, like making sure and as coaches, staying on top of the small details with them, like, staying on top of their fluid intake, staying on top of their, obviously in a prep, it may be different, but staying on top of their energy availability, and just keeping note of absolutely everything. Look, if there's something that's causing a trigger, that trigger needs to be removed. But I think with, we'll kind of maybe touch on bloating after this, but people have just become so accustomed to becoming bloated. People have become so accustomed to having poor digestive health because they've had it their entire life. They're like, well, I always get constipated, or I always suffer with bloating. It just kind of seems to be the norm. A lot more in females than males, I think. And I think as well, a lot of them will kind of, because a lot of females may suffer with that level of PMS where bloating may occur, and there's a lot that we can kind of do to manage that. It's probably not a lot that we can do to really like overcome it and cure it. It's just something that's going to happen, around that time. But for them, I think they just become so accustomed to it, which is kind of crazy to think that you would become accustomed to something that is so wrong. But for us, it's just taking note, if we have a trigger. Like, I don't like to run elimination diets with people because I think for a lot of time it may be a lot more effort than it's worth. But for in some cases, if a client is suffering from a food, like a trigger food, like I said, if it's a trigger that's always causing that, like if some people may have an intolerance to gluten, or may have an intolerance to this, and if they're consistently like ramming oats in every morning, that 20 minutes after the oats go down, they feel this massive bloat, or it may speed up, still, or slow things down. It could be worth maybe running something that we could be eliminating those trigger points. But some people, I think, become so accustomed to it that they'll nearly want to keep in the trigger foods because they like to have them, even though they're causing that much discomfort and digestive mishap.
Yeah, I've kind of stumbled across that quite a lot as well, and it can be it's a tricky one to deal with, as like, no, of course it's not at the same extent, but it is a slight form of self-sabotage, I suppose. What?
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Yeah. No, obviously I was kind of, as you could probably see in my face, I was reluctant to
You
say.
were very hesitant to say
Yeah.
that, yeah. But you know what? I'm kind of happy you said it, because it may open people's eyes up more. Because, like I said, you're not wrong in what you're saying. You are right in what you're saying. People are living with it and becoming people are becoming very comfortable being uncomfortable, but they are the causation of that uncomfort.
Yeah, like I know, like Lucia is the perfect example. No, Lucia is the perfect example because she's the most rational human in the world. She's not literally, like, I'm not like that. I'm like, compared to her, we are here when it comes to the rationality scale. But like, let's say for example, it's a meal that, let's say for example, even today is a perfect example, where it's Easter, so we were having a meal together where she would just be like, "No, can't do that. Sorry, I'll feel crap after." And it's actually solely from a digestive issue point of view, and she's right, because she knows so well, but it's just like, that should be a decision that's just there. It's just like, no, I don't want to feel crap for the next 90 minutes. No, thank you. Now, of course, these are things that we run into by accident, and it's a different story. But if it's something like, okay, I'm probably going to feel crap after that, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's just like, okay, right, let's not do that. Let's work on why that's happening, and let's try get to the bottom of that kind of thing.
1000%, so correct. But again, it probably does. And I only had this conversation with one of my clients this morning. We were talking about just clients in general, and what I kind of brought to the conversation said, there's the small things that we take for granted, clients don't understand. So it's so easy for myself and yourself to sit here and have this conversation, and a lot of our listeners, our coaches, will listen in to say, we understand that. We know if something disrupts your digestion, that you're to pull that food out. But general pop people don't understand that. And I think sometimes we do take our knowledge around what we may think are very simple things for granted. And this is why we do these topics. And this is why, something that may seem as simple as that, we're still going to bring it to the table, and we're still going to talk about it, because if this sparks a little bit of an onset of maybe for some coach there to put out a post on this topic, or to speak to your clients about it, or to do something that may just spark an awareness in somebody to say, oh, well, maybe that food is causing the problem, and maybe I need to bring that food away to actually improve my digestion. It's definitely worth having that conversation, big time.
I think it's also really important, and it's kind of it's a humbling thing to say as well. But unless you have a name tag that says God Junior, you have no idea what we're talking. Like, this is just so damn complicated that we like to think we're understanding what's going on, but we don't.
Yeah.
This is just like, okay, this might help, so let's try it. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Let's try it again. It's like I have no definitive answer to any definitive question. It's heartbreaking. It is absolutely heartbreaking, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
And unless you are somebody who has spent 15, 20 years on this one direct topic, then you can probably say, you could be wrong. You could be wrong, but you can definitely with confidence say, okay, this is what I feel. But like in your position, I suppose, is just like, okay, well, this is what looks to be the case. And kind of running with that, with like basically every single topic I touch on.
but everything is so multifactional. Like you can't just pinpoint one thing, and that's why, when we've spoke so far about bloating, we spoke so far about constipation, we didn't just say one thing. We've said it could be a potential of 15 to 20 different things, and this is why when we program, we may program in small little things throughout your day as clients, and probably a lot of our clients are now like listening to this and understanding, like things like daylight exposure, keeping neat levels, not like stupidly excessive, keeping everything in a very controlled environment. A lot of our clients work off food plans, a lot of them don't, a lot of them work off macros and calorie breakdown. And one of the big things we preach is food quality, because we know that food quality at a good rate is going to only improve that, rather than kind of impairing it. Just to kind of just touch back on that, I found the protein thing we were talking about. I should have said that the minimum protein level they'll allow for high endurance base is 0.4 grams per pound. Minimum. Sorry, I thought I said maximum earlier on. That's what caused that confusion.
Yeah,
that definitely makes things a lot easier.
Because I was just, as you said that, I was like, okay, well, there's more opportunity for me to be wrong than he is, and I'm pretty confident in my answer right here. So.
Yeah. No, you know what? And when I was saying it, I knew I was off when I was saying it as well. And when we listen back, we're probably going to be like, yeah, you were off. I think I was saying we were talking about the maximum. Yeah, but they were saying minimum. That's where those numbers came from. I was right in the numbers, though. I still remember the numbers, but we said minimum, not maximum.
Yeah. You just had them all. Did it say a max?
They didn't. No, they said minimum for endurance. Yeah, minimum. Right. So we covered more or less diarrhea, bloating, constipation. Just what the last thing I want to say, just touch on very briefly, is just when we talk about nutrition. Obviously as a whole, it's an extremely complex topic to kind of preach about, but when we're talking about food and kind of programming food, and specifically around the training window, I think is going to help people to kind of improve digestion. Is there any specific protocols that you'll take from a programming perspective, whether it's food sources or anything in particular around that training window, peri-workout window, to improve digestion?
Only if so this is if you would have had this conversation with me 2 years ago, I would have said, okay, well, what we know, we want to be driving high carb, high protein after we train, and yeah, of course we want to be doing that, but there's nothing directly I will do anymore.
Yeah, I feel like you're going to open up a can of worms, this answer.
No, so there's nothing directly I will do. The minute benefits. See, this is with people that are fine. If people have digestive issues, they have the digestive issues. I will pull out my toolbox and I will chip away one or two things, being like, okay, right, like all of the things I touch on, where I will pull fiber out of the training window pre and post. I probably will, for strength training athletes, it doesn't seem to be a problem. Fat, so I probably would keep fat in the pre-workout meal. Protein servings is just like, okay, right, I want to keep these nice and easy and light. Something that sits well might not be a lean mince here. I might use, I don't know, like I don't. Sometimes what I might do actually, if whey sits well with people, I'm not against using it twice around the workout window. Even if I don't use it in kind of like full protein servings either. So meaning, let's say, for example, somebody's a bigger, or somebody's gaining and they're having, I don't know, 120 grams of Rice Krispies 2 hours before they train. Like, there's going to be a byproduct of protein in there as well. So even like a 20-gram scoop of whey on top of that will be enough to drive a.
That's something that I've done a lot more lately, is start to scale back the amount of protein around the training window and getting incredible responses from it all around.
So I suppose it's one of them things where, especially when we're starting to push food, you don't realize it's just like, especially because you go from being if you go from being in a deficit, you're like, more food, I definitely always feel better. But then as you push things, it's like you become a slug.
Yeah.
You now, it doesn't matter how much cardio you keep in. When you start to push food, getting out of bed becomes harder. Little things like that. Now, if you're quite robotic in your ways, you don't tend to notice it until you pull things down. You're like, "Ooh, I feel pretty good." Now and like walking that tightrope of how can I drive performance whilst still feeling fantastic, while still being able to work well, being still able to focus on my college work, being not chronically inflamed, not seeing blood glucose going to bin, kind of like things like that. I know we're going to look at blood glucose on the next podcast. That will be a very interesting one. I look forward
to that. No, I think you're 100%, and like I think feedback is just so important as well. You know, the reason why we utilize such a in-depth, check-in form and consultation approach is just get that feedback. And I think from a nutritional perspective, it's very, very difficult to generalize. Some people, you could give them 60 grams of protein pre-workout and they could be fine. You could give them 60 grams of protein post-workout and they could just absorb it, cool. Some people, you have to scale it back so much that they're only getting like 10 to 15. And some of that maybe come from trace as well. And maybe 10 to 15 is a little bit low. Maybe we kind of hit at maybe the 20 mark coming from trace as well. But it just completely boils down to that individualized approach. But I did want to touch on it because I wanted to touch on it to open up that question and open up that response of nothing can be generalized. It'd be very, very unethical of the two of us to come on and say, right, this is an exact approach that you need to take to improve your digestion around the post-workout window and pre-workout window. I personally just feel like getting an adequate response from the client of what they enjoy. Like you said yourself, if you want to give them Rice Krispies and Cocoa Pops pre and post-workout because you know that they can digest that food post-workout, 45 minutes to an hour after they train, when resting heart rate has dropped down. And then an hour after that, they can sit down and have like a salmon and rice meal. They can sit down and have a chicken and potato meal, or chicken and this and a bagel here, something else. But what we're trying to do is kind of align them for better digestive function nearly later on throughout the day. If you know yourself, if you were to train legs now and an hour later sit down and have steak and pasta, you are going to be crippled, and not even crippled with digestion, but I can guarantee you fatigue is going to set in pretty damn quick. You're not going to be able to think straight or function. And it just comes down to being appreciative of what the clients have to do as well. I think for a lot of times it's so easy for us to throw a food plan together and be like, right, I can give you, 2 bagels with jam pre-workout. I can give you 200 grams of Cocoa Pops post-workout. Like if you were to give them that amount of, like, most of that coming from very, very easily digestible protein sources, or carbohydrate sources, giving them like really easy digestible protein, but then they have like a lot of stuff later on throughout the day, like their appetite is probably going to pretty much spike throughout the day. Like if you give them that early on, 2 to 3 hours later, like they're kind of probably hit like a pretty big like spike if they're in meetings during the day and if they're, very active in their day. That's a very, I suppose, unappreciable approach. And if you kind of maybe scheduled food around that window that may be offering probably a bit more of a benefit to digestive function and appetite later on, which appetite isn't even something that we touched, but we probably should have touched inside this podcast as well.
I love appetite stuff because appetite stuff is very, it's very cool to look at. Very, very cool. I've actually spent a decent bit of time looking at that recently. We'll do that at some stage as well.
Yeah,
I'd actually talk about that.
Definitely. Now, well, I think just on that one, we'll kind of just finish up on the little points on that. When we look at pre and post workout window, it's very easy to give a recommendation. It's very easy to say, look, this is what we think is right, but it just kind of boils down to you as an individual. Look, if you can handle, more dense food post, then that's suited for you. If you can handle, and you prefer to handle, like you said, 120 grams of Rice Krispies and some whey pre-workout because you can handle that, then you go and do it. It does boil down to you. I think from a performance perspective, it's hard to give recommendations as well on that one.
From directly from a performance perspective, so we definitely will see an increase in performance with carbohydrate present in the pre-workout.
Oh yeah, but I was more going along the lines of sources.
Oh yeah, so sources. No, there's nothing. It's a funny one. Like the more kind of like the more educated I get on these topics, I'm just like, nothing really matters.
Yeah. I was just about to say, the more you look into this, it's very difficult to say this is going to offer more than this. Like if we were to look at it, and again, probably 2 years ago, my answer would have been completely different. But I would more now say, well, if you got 100 grams of carbs in, it would be more beneficial than getting, this exact food source. Whatever that carb source is going to come from, that you're going to digest it more and you're going to feel more comfortable to be able to train. What we always say, when you feel good, you look good. When you look good, you play good. Like if you're going to eat a food source that makes you feel pretty good and makes you perform pretty good, does it really matter what the food source is?
Did you say we always say? That sentence has never come out of my mouth.
That's an ADLE coaching catchphrase, team catchphrase.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a good wrap up on. Right. So we want to cover glucose. I think we haven't got the guest in yet, but we're either going to cover blood glucose or diabetes next. That's going to be the next one. And we will make a conscious effort. We just, to be completely honest, we've just been so busy that we haven't had the time to come on and do them, but we are going to make a conscious effort because we know we do so little, but people really do appreciate them. And we actually do get like some pretty high listens on them as well. So thanks for that, Dee. I really appreciate that, buddy.
No problem at all. It's a pleasure.
All right, we'll wrap up there. Thanks a million, guys. Speak to you soon.